Hi, I'm Estelle Sun. I'm an associate professor in the accounting department at Questrom. My research interests include corporate social responsibility, disclosure, and firm valuation. Companies today face a big task of determining what and how much to publicly disclose about their CSR activities. A large part of my work hinges on this important disclosure issue. They look at the determinants of CSR disclosure, and they also establish that CSR disclosure is relevant for valuation purposes. When we talk about climate risk, there are primarily two kinds. One is the physical risk, that is the direct risk of climate change. For example, wildfires damage buildings and infrastructure, and droughts lead to crop failure. There's also transition risk, which relates to transition from carbon economy to zero carbon or low carbon economy. The extent of climate risk disclosure can vary significantly. I'm thinking of them in 4 levels. The lowest level is likely to be some boilerplate type discussion. So company may provide standard disclosure simply to cover some of their climate risk. The second level is going to be some discussion showing that companies are aware of some climate issues. For example, they have assessed the climate risk and also their impact in relation to the business. The next level, the third level, would involve some actions. So discussions on implementing actions, policies, and strategies to address the climate change issues. Finally, I believe the highest level of disclosure would of course include all 3 lower levels, plus some information on the financial impact resulting from climate change. In one of my most recent working papers, we tried to understand firms' climate risk disclosure in their 10K filings. We're particularly interested in disclosure of firms' wildfire risk exposure given the record-breaking events in the United States. We asked 3 main questions. Firstly, for companies located in a county with more wildfire days, do they disclose more? Secondly, how do they disclose information like this? And thirdly, why do they disclose? To answer the first question, which is whether they disclose or not, we do find evidence suggesting that companies located in counties with more wildfire days in a year disclose more. So there is a positive association. Having said that, we also show that wildfire disclosure in general is still quite limited. For example, only about 6% of wildfire exposures mention wildfire in their 10K filings. With respect to the second question, how do they disclose it? We look at in which section of 10K company mention wildfires. A 10K report consists of multiple sections, each of which serve a unique purposes. We find that most wildfire mentions are in the risk factor section, where companies talk about how wildfire may affect their operation in the future. So a forward-looking type disclosure. A smaller number of companies, but also a very important group of companies, talk about wildfires in sections such as legal proceeding, financial statement, even the audit report. These companies have likely experienced wildfire events affecting their past operation and had direct financial impact from those events. Finally, as for the why questions, we think it's because of the heightened concern of wildfire risk faced by the company. For example, we show that wildfire disclosure has increased significantly in recent years, consistent with the greater public awareness of wildfire impact in recent years. We also show that wildfire exposures disclose more if they are located in the Western US, in the utility industry, and exhibit a high level of tangible assets. Generally, companies with these characteristics are exposed to more wildfire risk. As such, they may respond more sharply to wildfire events and therefore disclose more. We do find evidence suggesting that investors negatively value wildfire-related disclosure. Moreover, we show that this negative pricing effect is more pronounced for companies that have had wildfire events affecting their past operation, relative to companies that simply mention wildfire as a forward-looking risk factor. Our findings suggest that companies' 10K reporting on climate change, particularly on wildfire-related information, is far from widespread. This result is not super surprising, given that there's no regulation mandating climate change or ESG disclosure. Over the years, there has been some guidance on ESG reporting for US companies. For example, the SEC's 2010 release provided guidance on firms' climate risk disclosure in 10K. In 2017, the TCFD issued recommendation to help companies provide more effective climate-related financial disclosure. More broadly, SASB has identified financially material topics for ESG reporting and provided industry-specific disclosure guidance. Going forward, I think we need both market and regulatory forces to ensure better, greater disclosure. One market force we have been seeing is the increasing trend of voluntary disclosure by companies because they see the benefit in doing so. To the extent that leading companies with established reputations start to report, other companies in the same sector will be compelled to do so as well. Another market force that will encourage more ESG reporting is the pressure from large institutional investors, active both in the public and private equity markets. In the end, I think regulation will be necessary in that the value of ESG reporting will only be realized when it's done in a way that enables comparison across companies.